Hello, everyone. I'm the Bodacious Cowboy with my co-host, Christy Knichel. Are you ready for a special edition of the Storytelling Chronicles? We are. Let's go.
Look out! Pop, it's showtime. Showtime. Guess who's back again? Oh, they don't know. I bet they know as soon as we walk in. Showed up, I'm wearing Cuban links. Designer mix. Inglewood's finest shoes. Don't look too hard, might hurt yourself. Know to give the color red the blues.
Hello, everyone. I am the Bodacious Cowboy. Welcome to another episode, number 30, I must mind you, of the Storytelling Chronicles, empowering women into logistics. Today, we've got a great show going on. We have an excellent guest, me and Mizel from Talento. How are you doing today, Christy?
Hey, I'm doing great. Great to be back for another show, that's for sure.
I know. It just feels like it's months. It really does sometimes because we're so busy. But that's good to be busy, right?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I love doing these shows and highlighting, the people that we talk with and sharing their stories. It's exciting.
Yeah. So why don't you tell everybody about our guest today?
Absolutely. So our guest, Mizel. As a registered behavioral therapist, Mia worked closely helping kids with severe needs gain communication skills and a better opportunity at life. While finishing her studies, she knew she loved constantly changing the fast-moving environment, so she took a leap of faith into the world of operations, stepping into a role at a nearshoring firm in Colombia. From there, she expanded to marketing and sales. What began as a sudden career shift quickly turned into a success story. Mia became a well-connected figure in the logistics and transportation industry, attending key events, forging powerful partnerships, and earning the nickname LinkedIn Mia for her strong presence on the platform. Now, as the co-founder of Talento, Mia leads with the same charisma and drive that propelled her rise. She is dedicated to helping logistics businesses seamlessly integrate nearshore talent into their operations, ensuring efficiency, scalability, and growth. Let's bring her on out.
Yeah, I don't know how she does it. I mean, I don't even think she sleeps, but let's bring her on.
Hello, you just caught me right in the middle of my nap.
Perfect.
Sorry to wake you up. You need it.
Thanks for the introduction and thanks for having me here. I'm very excited for today's conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. We're so excited to have you today. You're such a young woman in a crazy male-dominated industry that we're in. It's an exciting industry, but why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself, your journey, how you got into logistics and where you're at today?
Yeah, definitely. As you shared a little bit, I fell into this world. I came into working with kids with special needs particularly, and I always say that the logistics industry has a lot of special people. So there is some kind of connection there. But I really did just fall into the opportunity to move over to Colombia and start working at what was S-Works. And actually in this last month, I've been able to have a new opportunity where I'm now co-founding a venture where I'm still able to continue sharing the solutions that I was offering before that I loved to offer, which was nearshore talent, but also being able to target supply chain as a whole now and tailor further solutions, which includes, for example, today and day, artificial intelligence and business intelligence. So helping companies make decisions with their data and positioning it in a way that helps them to make informed decisions. And again, to optimize not only their team and their processes, but their business as a whole. So it's been a wild journey. Right now, I'm kind of dabbling in a couple of different functions, but also in some sense returning to what I originally did when I first joined this male-dominated industry. But I absolutely love it, so that's why I'm still here.
That's an amazing story. And again, like I said, when I met you a couple years ago, you just stood out to me because you put yourself out there. And that's one of the things I tell all the women that I work with in a mentoring fashion. It's so important to put yourself out there, network, meet people. And that's exactly what you did. So can you talk a little bit about your journey from being like a newbie to the industry to C-level and, being as a woman in logistics and, co-founding this company so fast once you came into this space?
It's been great.
Very inspiring. So everyone that's out there, listening, I just think this is such an inspiring story. just because it happened so fast for you. So yeah, let's hear about that.
Yeah,
She's
for sure.
quicker than a lightning bolt.
It's been overall, I think, a little bit under 3 years since I embarked on this journey, and right under a month since Talento has technically been born, but we launched the brand about 2 weeks ago. But yeah, I mean, the main piece that I think drove everything and was the instigator for it all was starting that brand awareness, but it was more of a personal brand awareness as opposed to a company brand awareness. So I actually spent the very first year, I did 18 trade shows. I was living in Colombia, but I was flying to the US basically every single week. But in there, my objective wasn't to go target my customers or my potential customers. It was actually to go find those influencers or the people that everybody else name dropped and always mentioned. And it was to become their best friend. Like a Christy, like a Trey Griggs, for example, those individuals that just know everybody. Because what I did was I went in, and instead of being kind of nervous about asking the wrong thing or showing that I didn't know, I went up and I literally told them, I don't know anything. I'm brand new here. My name is Mia. What's up? How are you? Can you please tell me everything you know? And so from that kind of like innocence in a way, people really felt like they wanted to guide me and support me. And then it became a genuine relationship. And then from there, I was able to leverage their networks, right? So going on LinkedIn and I'm sharing about my experience in an event and they're commenting and responding, so great to meet you. It's organic, it's natural, it's not something I even asked for, but because we have this relationship now, that's starting to bring visibility to other people's page. So that first event, I think it was Manifest, that I first went solo and had gotten a lot of connections. I think I met 100 people a day at that show.
Wow.
And I was messaging all of them afterwards, but it takes a lot of work, don't get me wrong. But the idea is that it was setting a really strong foundation. And then from there at the next show, everyone was trying to find out who was that one girl that somebody commented on. And now we don't know who she is, but now we want to find out. And it kind of was like a domino effect after that.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say, like, that is exactly what you did when I met you. And I think because of you doing that, it just, again, it made me want to help you even more because you just put it out there. And again, for anyone that is out there and are afraid to speak up and meet people, and like, it is just, in my opinion, once you do that, it's so easy to build those relationships. And like you said, it's important to build your personal brand, because I tell my sales team, you're not selling my company, you're selling yourself. If they don't want to work with you or talk to you, you're not going to be able to sell my company. Absolutely. So I think that was really important point that you made there. So,
yeah. And I will say,
something. One thing that I definitely know that Mia is not. She's not an introvert.
No way. But it's funny because I used to think I was, and I will say it took a learning curve to get here. So as I mentioned, Manifest was my very first conference by myself. And I remember leaving that conference crying because I had heard and been treated in so many ways that I was not accepting and I'm not cool with. And I had to kind of put up with it in that moment. So instead of continuing that and letting people treat me that way, it happened a lot being a younger girl walking by herself in a male-dominated conference where we're in Las Vegas and everybody is kind of in a different mindset, so I had to take some precautions to be safe, but I learned from it. From after that event, I said, you know what? I'm not taking this BS, excuse my language, but I'm not taking it anymore. No one's going to treat me like that. Nobody's going to talk to me like that. That is not okay. I don't need to suck up to anybody or take any disrespect for anybody's business. That is not what I'm here for. So as soon as I realized that, it took a big lesson, but as soon as I realized that, from there, it was a light bulb moment. And after that, anybody who ever tried to say something to me or to somebody else that was out of place, they know better, and they would come back and apologize. And then now they know their spot and I know my spot. And so it's been a learning lesson, but I think it's something that applies not only to business, but to women anywhere. The same experience I had there at that conference, I've had at the gym, I've had at the grocery store, so it's not just within this world, it's a life lesson.
Yeah. And that's how you gain respect. That's exactly how you gain respect.
Standing up for yourself.
Absolutely. 100%.
So can you share with us like a specific situation just of, because again, I've been through it, right? And one of the things we talk about is like, this still does go on. And my concern was always for the younger women coming into this space, right? You're a very beautiful young lady, and I don't want someone like you being taken advantage of in this industry, or feel like you have to be a certain way, or give into something to get something that, a business relationship. So just curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I will. There's many examples, so many examples, and it's really comments that are out of place. But more than out of place, it's in the fashion that they do it in. So, for example, it's not like whatever they're saying with their words. It's the fact that I'm in a conversation speaking about business things, and then somebody else feels that they have the right to interrupt this conversation and ask you on a date, or to do a drug with them, or to, something very inappropriate that in no sense would that make that doesn't make sense. So I instead of the stories, I think the important piece is what was something that really helped me was what I call my conference uncles. So I find people that I really trust, and I built that relationship with them, and I make sure that they know I'm there and I'm alone, and and to make sure that they're taking care of me, and vice versa. And I don't think that's an age thing. I think that happens at any point with our gender, being able to have somebody to lean on and support you, I think is incredibly important. So I call them my conference uncles, for lack of a better term, or my conference bodyguards as well. But it's just those people that have known me from the very beginning, and I've been able to share with them those instances, and they've supported me during it, and they've stood up for me during it. And that's what I want to see from others. So it is a long process to find those people. And some of those conference uncles might not be who you thought they were, but it's a process that, again, it's not just for business, it's for life.
Those are the barriers and obstacles that you have to break through and jump over. I mean, it's part of the journey. Nobody gets into this business unscathed. Nobody. And to your point, you have to be cognizant of your surroundings and literally have eyes in the back of your head, because you never know. It's a shame that this continues on. And that's one of the reasons why I do this with Christy, to make women more aware of that there are other women out there that are just like you, who had the same kind of problems. Here's what they did to overcome those problems, such as yourself. So, it's terrible that it still exists. It really is.
Yeah. And I think, again, you sharing the stories, because not everyone likes to talk about this stuff,
Right.
And I think the more transparent you can be and talk about it, then women will stand up for themselves when maybe they feel like they didn't, they couldn't, or, how do you even deal with a certain situation that happened? I'm curious, because, you talked about this at conferences. Those people that made those comments, like, how is that now? Because I'm sure, do you still see them at other conferences and things like that?
Oh, yes, I do. So there's that's definitely something that I still kind of deal with and think about often. Like, how do I continue this relationship, and what's right for me? And I don't want to hold grudges with anybody, because that is just more energy drained from me. But at the same time, I need to have my own barriers, right, and my own limits. So, I've done a couple of different things. I just make sure that I am safe. I make sure that I have the people around me that I need to keep me going in the right direction. I think that, I'll give you an example. And maybe that will help. Some of these individuals, what they'll do is they'll realize, because it was a low moment, and at an event, people go for different objectives, right? Some people go to network, and some people go to have a fun time. So it's really finding out what really is their goal. But for those that are having a fun time, a lot of times you'll realize afterwards that they feel guilty, and they'll come back and they'll apologize. Now, what I've really done is just keep my distance as much as possible. Is keep my distance. I'm going to give you your, hey, how are you? And move my way. But I've gotten past the fake smile and the fake friendly, because, as I mentioned, it's just draining for me, and it's not authentic, and it's not necessary. So I think people pleaser Mia would just say, just forgive them, move on, and then, keep going in your own rhythm. But in reality, today and day, the more that I feel like I mature and learn to respect myself, the more that I say, you know what, I'm not putting up with this, and like, I'll be civil, hello, how are you? But I'm just going to go off my own way. Now, it is really important, never talk bad about anybody. That's never something that I want to do. And part of maybe why I don't talk too much about stories and details and post them on social media, because these are people that we see all the time, but I see, you know, that people are people inside and they don't all have malicious intent. But at the same time, I'm not here to forgive them for their actions when they know they did wrong and they shouldn't have done those things. So it's a fine line. It's a little bit of a balance. But my suggestion for other females would be stick to what is right to you. If it doesn't feel right, walk away, and you don't need to put up with anything or anybody. Just leave, just move forward.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you sharing that, because again, like, it is hard to talk about, right? And I talk about my stories as well, and I don't name names either. And we still happen to work with some of those companies or see those people too that are out there, depending on the situation. And it is tough, because when I was young in my 20s, it was, you know, how do I handle this? I didn't have anyone to even talk to about it. I was almost like afraid to even say, this is what happened.
Yeah.
And how do I deal with this?
Yes.
As if I did something wrong, you know? So yeah, I mean, I think you're a very strong woman. And I think the guidance you just gave, I think, is perfect. You're right. They're going to know. And I think the way that you're acting is going to tell them even more that what you did wasn't right. And guess what? I'm still here. I'm not going away. Mm-hmm. So maybe it'll change their behavior with other women in the future. Who knows? But we can only hope.
We can only hope. Yep. And then I will also say, because I know we're kind of talking about the gender separation, but that's where women can really uplift women, or women can really push each other down. And I also had that kind of conflict where during those, you know, tough experiences, there's incredible people like Jennifer, like Christy, that are pushing you forward and really encouraging you. And then you have a couple of people where it comes in, it feels almost like a jealousy factor, or it's like, you know, I don't really want to support you because you could do better than me. So I'm just kind of keep my distance there. And so that, for a girl, you know, who wants to go and be a girl's girl, can be tricky. So for the woman out there, as much as you can show support or do those mentorship programs, I did a mentorship program with Women in Trucking monthly. I meet with my mentor. She's absolutely awesome. Shout out to Amanda. But those programs have been the things that kind of keep me going, because I don't know who to turn to. And sometimes I feel like I don't have anybody to talk to. But since I know that my mentor is literally there to help me with those things, and I start to take advantage of those spaces, and I feel so much better afterwards.
Yeah, you know, to your point, you know, when I was on the shipper side, and I had my team, I had a lot of women, and I wouldn't go into these board meetings by myself. I would go in there with some of the best people who are in the trenches, and a lot of them were women. And I said, before you go in there, you know, I pay you to speak your mind, not to internalize everything that you may feel you shouldn't say because you're out of line. No, speak what you need to say, because you need to be heard, because you are a professional in there. You know it much better than I do. And it kind of changed their mentality. So instead of walking in there kind of like sloping down and not feeling confident in their abilities, they walked in there like a boss lady, took the chair, and when it was time for them to speak, they spoke. And you know, that's the key to gaining that respect that you talked about, and knowing your barriers and being willing to say, no, you're wrong. Because a lot of them are afraid to say that because they're male dominance on that side. You know, they don't want to be talked about. Oh, did you hear what Carol said? Whatever. Who cares? You know, you got to get that off your chest, literally, and say it just the way it is. So I'm glad that you feel that way and that you go into that with that mindset, because that's what all women need to do, especially nowadays. You know, it's been going on
easier said than done. Easier said than done, but I totally agree. I mean, when I first joined this industry, I was hired in May, and I moved to Colombia in July. I had been to Colombia one time before, visited the office that we had been thinking of buying. You know, it was brand new to me. My family's from Argentina, so I speak a different dialect of Spanish. So when I got to the office, I was the only gringos, you know, American, Argentinian, who was much younger than everybody there. I dressed differently. I spoke differently. Like, none of me fit in with that office. And I could tell, like, okay, I got to win my respect. These people are all older than me. Nobody thinks that I belong here. I don't even know if I belong here. I'm having imposter syndrome. Like, what do I need to do to win this respect over? And it was not saying anything. It wasn't telling them, please, you know, I'm your boss. Like, listen to me. No. It was literally just saying, okay, let me listen to you. What do you need? Okay, I'm going to act on what I say I'm going to act on. I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do. And that's it. And I remember specifically one conversation. He was our our IT manager at that time. He was over in his 50s. And he comes to me and he's like, Mia, you're younger than my kid. But at this point, I hated you when you first came in. I said, why did they put this young girl in this spot? This makes no sense to me. And he said this to me very transparently. And he ends the conversation and he goes, but I just want to let you know, you won my respect over. And so whatever you say goes. That's all I wanted to tell you. And that was the end of the conversation. I'm like, okay, I feel good today.
Yeah, that's awesome because, you know, earning respect as a woman in this industry. Like, so how do you feel you earned his respect, or how do you think in general we need to, you know, earn that respect, or how do you, I guess?
So I think every person is a little bit different, you know, but I think in general, the rule of thumb is the same, is show respect to get respect. You know, this particular person was someone who didn't necessarily get along with a lot of people. And also when we're talking IT, they're not necessarily the most social people in that sense. Yeah. He didn't have, you know, as many friends as he had maybe frenemies. So showing him that, you know, even if you kind of treat me rudely or aggressively, or you don't talk to me the right way, I'm still going to say that I messed up when I messed up. I'm still going to say I'm sorry when I'm sorry. I'm still going to say you're right when you're right, and I'm wrong when I'm wrong, you know, and I'm still going to continue being me. And so he realized that even though he had pushed my buttons or would push others, or somebody else would yell at him for something, and I would just kind of brush it off, and he's like, okay, well, clearly this isn't going to get to her, so let me just stop trying to play hardball and let me just, you know, show respect. And so it just happened naturally.
Well, I think the other part I was thinking of too is, like, now that you are a founder of a company, you're in a role where I feel like the respect is different. I'm not saying it should be different, because everyone should respect everyone in the same ways. But I noticed maybe early on it wasn't so much with men, but like as I became CEO of this company, it is different. And it just has been different. And I know you're very new, so I'm just curious to see if anything has changed in the last few weeks, but I'm sure it's probably, you're going to see a change over time.
Definitely.
I think it's happening, and maybe there's things that I haven't identified yet. I can feel a shift, you know, and we were talking, Jeff, in the beginning, I'm a person that really leads by listening to the rest. And so I'm now in a role where everyone thinks like, Mia, just make the decision. And, you know, you tell us what to do. And I'm like, no, but you guys, let's all talk and let's think about it together. So I think the expectation of what I'm supposed to offer to my team and vice versa is slowly changing. I don't want to lose that concept of listening to my entire team and having their voices be heard. But I do think that we can't fall into that bottleneck of no one makes a decision. We all just vocalize what we think, and then we all just wait for someone to make a choice, and then no one makes a choice. So I am still trying to figure out, you know, a business and what are the things even involved in a business, right? Like, what's the difference between a finance manager and, I don't know, AP and AR, and can one person do it all? Do I have to break it up? Like, it's all those little nuances that I was seeing from a different angle, and now I can see all of it. I had seen a lot of it, but now I'm seeing all of it. So it's a learning process, and it's not easy, but I love learning. So it's been a lot of fun. And I think, to your point, the learning lesson is going to hit a little bit later, but I'm starting to see it now with the change and how the new role has changed, you know, my function and how I work with the rest of my team.
So how about your team, though? I mean, because when we were talking in the green room before we went live here, you said you brought most of your team over to Talento, right?
Yeah.
How many women and men were on that team?
Ooh, Good question. I think we're at 70 something employees right now. So a pretty good size. In terms of women and men, we actually have a lot of women on our team, especially on the admin side. We've notoriously been a more woman dominated admin team. Which I love personally. I think it's good to have a little bit of a balance, but depends on the role. It depends on what you're looking for. And I think it changes up the environment a little bit. You know, when we're talking about transportation, and the customers I've visited, for example, are very male heavy offices where there's basketballs, and you can see they even have, you know, a little track to play some golf in the middle of their lunch break and things of that nature. And versus in our office, we have some girls that are doing Zumba classes, or they're crocheting and they're actually giving these little stuffed animals to the guys in the office. And so there's a little bit more of like a different feel. It's like one little example, but it does have an impact. So yeah, for us, we're a bit of a mix. I don't know the percentages. I would like to say we're probably about 30% women on the operations side, but more of 60% or plus on the admin side of females.
So let me ask you this, a follow-up question. So your emotional intelligence, right, with the people that, and correct me if I'm wrong, so they didn't really answer you worked with them when you were at S-Works, right? But now they have to answer to you. So have you seen a personality shift between your new position as a founder compared to your old position? And what are you doing to compensate for that? You know, now there might be a little bit of a disconnect because they're like, Mia, now we have to answer to her.
Yeah. Well, actually, we haven't had too many problems in that sense because most of the administration team did change. A lot of those key players are a little bit different. So they were already on our team before, but just in a different role. So we never really had that dynamic to compare to from before. But the operations is the majority of those remain the same, and those report to our operations manager. So for them, they haven't had much change. They don't have to necessarily report to me, but the leadership team is a little bit different. I think it's been more of an impact for me, honestly, than for anybody else, because most of the admin team is a little bit newer to this nearshoring world. But at the same time, you know, it's been weird. A lot of these individuals have known me from the beginning of S-Works. You know, some of our original 5 employees, of the first 5 we've hired, 4 are still there. So they've seen my experience and my growth. So with them, I think it's been a lot of just more encouragement and confidence that, you know, Mia, we've been with you from the beginning. We've seen what you've done and what you've preached, and we believe in what you're going to continue to do. So we want to be a part of this journey with you and be there with you. So it's come a lot from an angle of support, and we're going to continue to do the things, you know, and keep everything the same because you're still there and everything's still the same. So knock on wood, not a lot of things have changed. There was obviously a period of transition where people were worried of what was going to happen. But that confidence and that relationship with myself was what helped kind of calm things a little bit. So I went to Colombia and I made sure I was there to calm them all down. I'm flying again this weekend to make sure that I'm showing face. And again, you know, if I say something, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to show trust, not just say it, but actually show that.
Do it.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think it's so important. I think the other important thing too is I worked in my company before I owned it, obviously working my way up in different roles. And I think that there's a different respect you get from your people when you've worked in the business like you have to. So I think the fact you can share that story with the team is important because they know that you have been in some of those roles before, and there's just a greater respect for that. And I'm curious too, because of having the remote team, obviously, you know, you're flying there, you're visiting them and all that kind of thing. How challenging is it to train and work with them and kind of just, you know, show up and be there for them? I know obviously a lot of communication has to happen, whether it's over the phone or through Zoom or whatnot, but is it challenging?
I would be lying to say no, because there's obviously challenges in every kind of session or setup, even when you're in a physical office, like where is everybody sitting? Do we have a common space to connect? But I would say that overall, it's a pretty fluid process. We have Microsoft Teams as our channel for communication, and everyone's expected to use that channel. We all understand that ideally, if we can do it by message, we will. And if not, we'll book a time and we'll all connect and get all the right people on the call at the same time to make that decision. So really optimizing everyone's calendars and the limited space that we have. But other than that, I don't necessarily go physically in person to support communication. I really do it to build the relationships. When I'm there, it's those lunch, sit downs that we have, or after work, we go and grab a beer, or what they call a michelada. And just those little moments that help me get to know the people and then understand, how is it going with them on with their customer? Are there opportunities there to make it better? What do they need? What does the customer need? It becomes like a personal and a professional mission all at once. But in terms of just talking and collaborating with the team, I think as long as you have your expected communication channels and a form of accountability, everything else is pretty fluid, should be, in theory.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I'm sure you have maybe layers of management over there, maybe within those teams, or team leads, et cetera, that, are the eyes and ears, right, of the floor. Absolutely. I think that's great. I know there's a lot of companies out there doing that, but, these are some of the things that I, didn't really ask anyone before. And just, again, when you have that many people, you said 70 people. I know I have 50 some people that work for me, and most of them are here in the office. And like you said, even though you're in the office, it is still challenging sometimes.
Totally.
Communication in general. So,
yeah. And the big piece as well is that, and I was just talking with my team about this today as well, we're not just handling our business. Our business is our customers' business as well. So when we're thinking of HR, solutions like, for everyone's birthday, maybe we want to give them a day off. If talento was just talento, I could give my team a day off because I'm just asking myself, hey, can this person get off? Yes, they can. But if I want to give, John, who's working for Nichol, a day off for his birthday, I can't make that decision. I need to go talk to Christy and go get her approval to make that decision. So, and now if I have 50 customers and every single one has different requirements, then now the culture for every single account is very different. So being able to understand the difference between talento, how do we come into this? How do we support our customers? And then how is every single customer treated and managed? It becomes very tailored and very personalized, and which is why we need team leads. We need account managers. We definitely need eyes and ears. I love having a physical office in Colombia where most of our people actually sit as well to support with some of that management piece. But definitely the larger the team gets, you need to have your layers of management, or that's all going to explode like a volcano.
Yeah. And you made a great point too. Again, like your people, they work for you, but they're also working for clients, say like myself, for example, and every client is going to be different. So you recognize there could be challenges depending on, those people working with different customers and maybe what they're allowed to do based on that customer they're working with, or, time off, et cetera. So that's something I don't think I would have thought of, to be honest.
Yeah. And I think that sometimes when people also talk about nearshoring, they kind of avoid those details to just kind of like continue forward. You needed a sales rep. Cool. I got you a sales rep. But it's like, whoa, hold on. I actually asked somebody this week, I'm like, so how many years of experience are you looking for? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, what do you mean? What do I mean? I'm like, do you mean 6 months, 5 years? Like, what are we talking about here? And he was really stunned that I had asked him that. And I had asked him about how his training looks like, right? Because that's very different personality. Is someone who's a junior who can plug in to a training program that's just shadowing, as opposed to someone who maybe has 5 years and the training program is super elaborated in a 3-month process with detailed KPIs. Different people or different profiles would and would not be successful in those different roles. So it is really like looking at a company holistically and understanding every piece as much as possible. You don't want to waste their time, but it is really important to understand as much as possible.
Yeah. one big thing that I used to drill into my team all the time, is, do you know who pays you? Oh yeah, XYZ company. That's who I work for. I said, no, because XYZ company wouldn't be in business if it wasn't for XYZ's customers. I know who's John Hancock is on my paycheck. You should know that too, and drill it into their head, because they think that money just grows by osmosis. That they just show up and they're going to get a freaking paycheck, and you don't have to do much for it. But once you drill that into their heads about keeping a client on board, because it's much cheaper to keep one on board than it is to find a replacement, because how hard is it to go and find a replacement, and you have to reinvent the wheel. The wheel is already burning and turning. Now you have to create that strategic value to keep them interested and on board for a long time. That's not easy. That's not easy.
Keeping the customer is a very similar cycle to keeping the employees, and that pain of losing them after investing so much time in training and sourcing and vetting and interviewing, all those things. It's awful. It adds so much to your plate. So I totally understand.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had a question, like, what changes do you think need to happen in the industry to make it more inclusive and welcoming for women? I mean, I'm a woman-owned company. You're a woman-owned company now. And so I'm just curious what your thoughts are that make sense, that, as far as changes.
Yeah. For me, one of the things that I've started to slowly see and I think is really helpful is more of those like organizations and communities and giving them more visibility. I know we mentioned like the Broker Carrier Summit, and they're doing something with women in supply chain as well. I know you gave out an award. It's those spaces where women feel like, hey, this is my go-to gals that I can trust and I can count on and I can talk to. And that's really important to have, to what we were mentioning before. It's the first person that I want to turn to is my girls and ask them about their experience. And it can be really hard to do that on social media, where it's either hit or miss. They're either going to be really engaging and friendly, or they're going to be like, F off me, leave me alone kind of thing. And I've had a little bit of both with the females in this industry as well. So having a very clear channel that I can enter, and people that are predisposed, already volunteering to share this information, that mentorship program that I was mentioning at Woman in Trucking, that's been huge for me. It's a big time investment, when I zoom out and I'm like, okay, I'm investing an hour consistently monthly, but an hour consistently monthly that I'm getting so much out of, much more than an hour can give me, So if you look at it in that sense, those mentorships, organizations, communities, anything that we can kind of give that more of a predefined space, I think that would be really important.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's important for women to see that those things exist, and women like ourselves standing out there, or even Jeff advocating for women, because to be honest, last week I spoke at Carnegie Mellon University, and the majority of the audience was men. And it was talking about my journey, but also women in heavy industry. So it's interesting, because the first question was, me talking about the barriers that women have coming into this industry. And as I looked out there, I said, well, before I answer that question, I want to thank all the men that are sitting here that came to this, because you're going to be my first answer, that men are some of the barriers for women getting into this space. And yet they're sitting out there, wanting to participate. Right. So, I think that that's something that is so important as well. And I appreciate you putting yourself out there, doing what you're doing too, because again, we have to continue this and have a lot of women doing this. And I do think that will continue to help as we, continue to find women in this industry.
Of course. It's the word of mouth power. And I think that you definitely hit the nail on the head with, we can't forget about the men. The men are still there. The men are still important. It's not being better than the other. It's being equal. So the only way we can do that is to do it together. And that's why, I don't just lean on my fellow girls. I lean on my fellow conference uncles. Those individuals are equally, if not more important, in communicating that we show women respect. And so me telling a man to show a woman respect, he doesn't care. I'm a woman. But a man telling a man to show a woman respect might weigh a little bit more on him, and maybe work out for us, the woman.
Right. Yeah. And that's why I love that Jeff asked me to co-host this with him, because he's a man that's like, we need to make a difference. and do this. And, probably, people are like Christy and Jeff together doing this, like, it's very interesting. So Jeff, what do you say about that? How do you feel since we've done this, the men in the industry, like the response just from you kind of pushing this agenda?
It's been somewhat overwhelming, and I try to go back, and I talk about this because it is very important about the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and Title VII. From that time to where we are now, have we improved? Have women got the acknowledgement that they need? Yes, but are we where we need to be now? No, we're getting better, but still, when you think about it, and you two own your own business, so you're a little different compared to other women who are working for a living, don't take that wrong, and working for a company that they get a paycheck. Women are still making 86 cents on the dollar, all right? You got women truck drivers out there that have to be absolutely cognizant of their surroundings constantly all the time, with eyes in the back of their head, because they're going into dangerous areas where it's male dominance. They're going into truck stops, they're going into these truck stops to try to take showers. They're by themselves. To Mia's point, when she went first to Manifest, and the looks that they were getting and the way she was getting treated. Well, think about that when you're on the road far away from the family, and you got to deal with that every single day. That's why I want to get those drivers out there, the men out there. I want to get those logistics and supply chain leaders out there who are men, who kind of look at this from a different perspective, that yes, there is a problem, and some women don't tell you that they're having a problem. Mm-hmm. It's up to you to figure that out and ask those kind of questions politely, right? Where you're going to make them feel comfortable, and it really starts from the time you go to an interview and you're interviewing for the job. You're a woman. What kind of questions are you going to ask about the culture of the business? What are you walking into? Are you walking into a hornet's nest, right? Or is it going to be someplace where I'm going to really enjoy? And why am I going to enjoy working here? Tell me a little bit what I can expect. I'm a woman, men and women are different. I'm going to have a kid later on. What happens if I have a kid? What kind of benefits am I going to get? Am I not going to have that? There's just so many different things that are out there that need to be discussed more and recognized. That's why I'm doing this, because I was in that leadership role. I hired a lot of women back in the late 80s and 90s before tools were even out there, and I keep on telling the story. It's kind of funny. I was a bad guy. I cursed all the time and just was overbearing and everything. So what did I do? I hired a pastor's wife, right? A very powerful woman who was very headstrong, that would put me in my position, and made me a better leader, made me a better person, that realized that, no, you can't sit behind that door with it closed. You need to have it open. You need to listen to your people. Some leaders out there listen to women, only listen, but they don't listen with intent. What is being said? How are you understanding that? How are you going to reply to what is being said? Did you hear it right? That's still an ongoing problem in the industry. No doubt about it, and that's why we need strong women like yourself, Mia, and Christy out there. That's going to help these women to bust down these barriers, climb over those obstacles, know that they have people that they can go to, like you say, the conference uncles. I love that saying, but being serious, people that they can lean on. Mm-hmm. Have you ever faced this before? Mm-hmm. Well, instead of women, get comfortable with some men. Have men help you out in what you should say to a boss, like I just said, to respond to something, so you can gain that respect, just like you did, Mia, So, you could be a mentor out there as well, telling women out there what you've gone through and how you beat it. You cried. Okay, so what? You cried, but it made you stronger because it made you realize things. These are very important things and topics that need to be discussed further.
I agree. When I do my content on LinkedIn, I try not to talk about my solutions, and I try to talk about things that I would hope would inspire somebody else. And lately I've been thinking and planning my future content more around that and being kind of like a mentor to those younger people or those females in the industry, because a lot of my experiences, not a lot, all of my experiences come from that position because that's who I am. So being able to, turn those lessons, I do a lot of personal and work-life balance and things of that are true, but I think that grounding it a little bit more to what people need to hear, and to your point, Jeff, not everyone's willing to listen, not everyone's ready to listen. So asking the right questions is great, getting the confidence to get up there and knock on your boss's door. And then he said, okay, great, thanks for the conversation, Mia. And he heard absolutely nothing you said, and he's not going to think about it ever again. So having the males there help us communicate it in a way that is going to get heard, and listened to by the males is key. It's really important. It's not easy, but it's important. It's what's going to make everything complete. Otherwise, you only have half of the puzzle. The woman's still speaking up, getting there, getting to the door, and nothing's being heard, nothing's being taken into account, and we're stuck into the same cycle.
Yes, but to your point also, to be able to interact with that person who didn't really hear what you were saying and be able to stand your ground and saying, did you understand what I said?
Huge.
Huge. That is massive. It's not like backing down and saying, you won, I'm out of here. No, stand your ground and make sure that you drill it into that person's head. I don't care what you need to do, but do it in a very politeful, respectful way as a professional. Because that's the way you want to come across. You may feel, you when you have that gut feeling, you get butterflies before a race or something like that. That's the thing that you feel. And you feel that before you answer that, you're in a great place because you're doing the right thing. Being uncomfortable in this industry will help you gain strides. You got to be comfortable to be uncomfortable.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things you touched on a couple times is your mentoring that you're doing with women in trucking. Would love to hear a little bit more about that, because that's one of the things I advocate about, finding your tribe, getting mentors, not just maybe one, but multiple different ones, men and women. So what made you do that, first of all, and what are you getting out of it, and why is it so important?
Yep. So when I first joined this world, I'm like, how can I learn as much as possible in a short period? And reading articles, listening to podcasts, I was doing all those kinds of standard outlets. But what I really wanted to do was talk to people and hear from them specifically what's been going on, what have they seen. So I was a member of TIA. I had signed up for their mentorship program. I was in a staffing association group as well and joined their mentorships. And all the mentorships, they all did one meeting and then they all fell off. And I would follow up, hey, how are you? How's it going? And they all fell off. And the only one that would consistently just continue to meet with me was Amanda. And Amanda's absolutely spectacular. And in the beginning, we didn't really know, what should we even talk about? Do we talk about business? Do we talk about what we do? Do we pitch each other? What do we talk about? And honestly, sometimes we don't really have anything to talk about, and it's kind of like a de-stressing moment. And then sometimes we do, and we'll talk about work or something crazy that's going on. And it's in those conversations that I start to learn the nuances and understanding, okay, so you run this company and you work with this team, but then you mentioned this. How does that play in? You mentioned for example, brokerage versus freight, what's the difference between the two, or your agents versus your employees? What does that mean? So it was organically through conversations, I was starting to learn vocabulary, how people use the language, and then implementing that more and more into my convers as I went along. And then again, just being a person that you can just rely on, I'm having an awful day. I just need to yell and rant. Who can I lean on? And it was always Amanda. So I would like to have more mentors. That was the only program that actually was conducive to making that relationship. And since then we've continued it, which I love. But I've also had have some organic mentors, some people that are just in the industry that have always checked up on me and vice versa, and have always given guidance. And slowly, we continue to make that more consistent. So for example, like Christy, I see you as a mentor in the sense of like a role model. I look up to you, but we don't talk enough, transparently, to be more of a mentorship in that sense. So having a more consistent, frequent conversation, in that sense, that's kind of how I view mentorships. So with that being said, I have a couple of rounds out there outside of Amanda as well. But I think that program or that mentality of having someone to lean on, to turn to, you can just call them, and whether it's a happy news or a sad news, they're there to listen to you and give you advice. I think that's absolutely essential for anybody, and especially for a woman in logistics. Oh my goodness, it's a game changer.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, like you mentioned, there's some formal programs out there, and then there's informal, which maybe that's what you're doing with Amanda now. And again, I think different people will bring different ideas and different styles or different things that maybe they're going to challenge you with. And I think part of it too is I actually talked to a gentleman this morning who had asked me to help mentor him even. And part of it is like, what is it that you want to get out of this? What is it that you want to learn? Let's talk about some of the things maybe that are challenging you. And maybe I can think about some things that you didn't think about that you should be thinking about, within their role and stuff. Because again, all these people are in different type of roles. You can be a business owner. You can be just someone in a company. Even if you find other people within the company, I think that's important. And again, I think sometimes I've done a lot of, I would say, informal mentoring, where people have reached out to me and said, how did you grow your company to this size? What are some of the challenges? But the same token, I'm like, well, how did you do this? How do you pay your salespeople? What are your incentive programs? And it's interesting that so many people are willing to share that, because I want to see this person successful. They want to see me successful. And then you just all learn together. And again, you just have to ask. You just have to, what is it that I want to learn from this person? And again, I always tell everyone to reach out to people too that you aspire to be. It doesn't have to be in the same, industry or same type of business that you're doing. Even though I reach out to our competitors and talk to them, and they help me and I help them, and we talk about it. But it's also talking to people in other industries, because you'll find that no matter what the business is, we all have the same challenges, just in different ways. And I have another group that I'm actually a part of, where we get together once a month, and there's like 6 of us CEOs that, we have to pick a challenge, and then we all talk about, does anyone have solutions for this, or how did you deal with this? So I love being able to give back and help people not make mistakes that I made, or learn something from them that maybe I didn't know.
Right. It's mutual. It's mutual learning. It's like, I don't know what questions I don't know and what information I don't know. So talking to people in a completely different industry, parallel to it, might actually bring something about that I had never even thought about in a billion years. And as you mentioned, Chris, you're talking and sharing, but they're also talking and sharing. And so you're both gaining knowledge from that conversation. And honestly, that's like the root of my business development. Like it's all about building relationships. I don't spend all day, prospecting and filtering lead lists. It's like everyone's a prospect to me, because I want to talk to everybody, and everybody has a brain, and everyone has an opinion, and it all can be valuable. So I'm a little bad on that. I definitely need to work on, prioritizing things in that sense. But I really do think, like, how do I know if Jeff does or doesn't have something valuable to tell me if I never talk to him, So let me just talk to him and then we find out. But it's, I don't have time for all of that. But in theory, it's kind of how I run.
Yeah, I'm going to get my ass kicked for saying this, but I think they should have a college course out there for men, how to engage women in the business arena. Seriously, I mean, men are men. Let's just face it. I'm a guy. I know how I used to act when I was young. I'm not innocent. But I think it's something to think about. Like even when you're getting hired, and you're going through an HR or whatever, some of the role playing and all of this kind of stuff, that you have to go through to see whether or not you're a good fit or not. I think more questions have to be asked, especially if it's a lot of women in that culture, and you're male and you're going into it. this is what to expect. This is how we expect you to act,
Well,
and vice versa. I mean,
in
seriously.
fact, like I was at a college conference on Wednesday, and I was sitting next to a potential customer that was there to try to recruit as well. And he happened to tell me out of their company, they only had 4 women in the company, and they have a problem recruiting women into the company. And he's part of HR. And I thought it was interesting because one of the things he mentioned too was the amount of complaints they get, even just from those 4 women, with the men in the company that are saying things they shouldn't say, and they're still struggling with it. And I think that, now that you said that, there needs to be a lot more education on that side of how to handle that, how to deal with that, because if they're not doing that, like you said, men are going to be men. And sometimes I feel like they don't even realize what they're saying.
They don't. Here's a perfect example. Here's the perfect example that's going to make you feel ill. All right. I was in that situation when I was 25, 26, 27, right? You had a great weekend. You went to the bar, you're around the water fountain, and there's women passing you. Oh man, I met this really nice babe. And it goes on and on and on and on, because they don't realize, right? They do not realize what they're talking about. They're talking to their bud, their good friend in the office, but they have no idea how that makes the woman behind them feel.
Right. It's not ill-intended.
I didn't know that. I mean, like I said, I'm not innocent, but yeah, that happens. And those are the kind of things that you have to learn how to curtail. This is what you don't do around the water fountain or in the cafeteria or something like that, because it happens all the time. I don't care what guy out there, you do it. You do it. It just has to, you just have to be cognizant of your surroundings.
Right.
You
Aware.
really need to do that.
Yeah, absolutely aware. Because again, I gave the gentleman some advice, right? But he's also fighting like the leadership team on things that they need to do. And again, I mean, I'm sitting here listening to him say about these comments and stuff, and these people still work there too. And again, it's like, well, what are you doing about it? How are you trying to make a change? Because like, you're not going to be able to bring more women in if you're not making changes of how that behavior is happening in your company to begin with.
Yep.
And I've had other brokerages call me, a couple, how do I get more women into my company? Because they are completely male. And you might have one. I'm like, you need to have more than one woman, like for one. And, again, I applaud them for even calling me and asking me the question. Because to me, that shows that they do care. And I think they do realize that women bring value to the table. And
Definitely.
Right.
Definitely.
So the fact that, some of these men are asking about that, I don't know that would have happened, years ago.
Yeah, the intention is there, but it's right. Tricky though, because the woman, you want to set her up for success, and if you are bringing on these women to this environment because it's so male heavy and they're doing all these things that they shouldn't do, then you're just setting this girl up for all that awfulness to happen to her. So instead of the problem or the solution being, instead of hiring girls, we'll just keep the males because that's just how they are. No, it's stop accepting that that's just the way boys are. Let's educate them. Let's change that. And also has to do some education with the woman, right? Having them understand how far, what they should and shouldn't allow. Because I know that myself, there were certain things that I'm like, okay, this person asked me for my phone number or they asked me for my Instagram. Maybe they just want to be friends. Maybe this is okay. And it's like, whoa, no. As a woman, I should have known that is a red flag and that's not okay. And that was, a lack of education on my side. So I think it's part and part. So then we can act the right way. I definitely think that we're going in the right direction. Slowly but surely. It's going to take a long process, but, it's important to do.
Yeah. And here's may not want to hear this, but I've heard it several times. But sometimes women are afraid to go into HR because HR really isn't there for you. They're there to protect the company, and there will be repercussions. May not happen like right away, but they're going to come down that track. It will, and that's where a lot of women and men who think they got the buddy as the HRBP in there, and they go in there and they make the complaint, goes on your record. because the company doesn't want to get sued for sexual harassment and all this other kind of stuff. So, I mean, something there needs to be changed as well.
Wow.
You know, I mean, there's so many different things in corporate that needs to be changed to protect the innocent, to be heard, to be listened to, and not to take it personally or to protect the corporate environment, but to actually try and ask questions. How can we be better as a company so this doesn't happen? You know,
well, I think part of it too, Jeff, is not even just the education. It's the example leadership is showing. It's how we act. Like, I can tell you, again, I'm not saying that that's never happened here. I've never heard of it, right? And typically I do get everything back to me at some point. I have enough ears and eyes on the floor. But, you know, I will say that it's the way the leadership acts in front of the team. And if you are goofing off like these men do in some of these companies that are more the bro type situation, and then you bring women into that, like, and that doesn't change, and you've already created that culture, that's going to be hard to change.
Yeah. You lead by example. So, you know, you're setting that as the leaders, and everybody else is going to follow suit. Good.
Yeah. Because I had to say this, but sometimes when you walk in there, you know, the HR thinks that you're a cancer. You're no good for the culture. I mean, seriously. And they want to hear you, but they want you out because you're now labeled as a constant complainer. We don't need this in our business like this. You know, now the women are going to internalize that, like I said, and be free to speak up to protect themselves. You know, and even goes to guys too. But I mean, that mentality of human resources needs to change as well.
And I hate that you had to even say that, Jeff. But
I hate saying it.
Well, no, listen, but like it literally brought back a memory to where there was something like that happened in the past, in past life. It was probably 10 plus years ago where there was a situation like that, similar, just some things, you know, being said that shouldn't have been said. My dad's instant reaction was that, to get rid of that.
She's a cancer, whatever.
And I was just like, what? Like, even called our attorney and everything. And
so it goes on.
Yeah. And I'm just sitting here thinking, like, I couldn't believe my dad's mentality was like that in that situation. But now that you brought that up, like, it literally just was like, oh my God, like my dad actually.
I've had similar. Well, one time when I had the beginning during this kind of same episode or moment where I was having a lot of negative experiences in the industry because of these males, and I was getting some like messages, like an AI generated photos of me and somebody else. And so I had told my team, you know, like, I'm getting inappropriate messages and, you know, this isn't okay. And the response was, well, let's see what kind of messages you're sending me up to cause that response. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, let me just calm down right now and not talk about this. But it wasn't the right answer.
Right. Instead of trying to protect your innocent, you're already guilty. I mean, but that's exactly what they're just telling you, you know? Yeah. You know, I mean, there is two sides to every story, granted. But, I mean, come on. Some people don't listen, like I say, with intent. And if they listen intently, then you wouldn't have to ask stupid ass questions like that. I mean, but it happens. I mean,
he was already brushing me off like, you know, guilty, you know, there's nothing to review here. But something that they do in Colombia that's pretty cool, maybe something the U.S. could incorporate, is they have different committees that are required by law to protect the people. So HR is technically for the business and the committees are for the people. So if there's any complaints, anything like that, the board of the committee is different people from the company itself. So we appoint different people depending on, you know, how much we trust them, how unbiased we feel they are. We select this. This is a democracy. They're elected into these roles, and then that committee exists for the life of the company. So at any moment, someone can open up a case or go to somebody from that team and make a comment or anything along those lines. But I think it's a great idea, so the people feel like they have a space they can go to that's for them and not for somebody else.
Yeah, no, I love that idea. Actually, it's a solution to
not
a
a bad
problem.
idea.
Yeah, that exists. I mean, to be quite honest, I feel like I didn't even think about
Christy is going to do that next week.
Right? Actually, we've already talking about a person about like chief people person or whatever you want to call it. But I mean, yeah, I mean, that's definitely a good idea. So
yes, I love
And I applaud you for sharing, your story and talking about this, because again, I think it is so important to other women, but also men that might listen to this, and maybe they'll take a hint from this and kind of look at themselves as they're doing these things.
I think that some of these stories are not even allowed to say on video, but I really hope that the root message to everybody is that just be yourself and show respect to yourself, and you'll gain that same respect, and don't cross your boundaries for anybody else.
Nope.
Oh, I love that. Well, I was going to say we come to the end of the show, and this has been an amazing show that we had with you, and I want you to leave our viewers with some advice, whether coming into the industry or anything that you want to share.
Yeah. I mean, I think that right now my kind of theme for life is just be you, and anything is possible. Don't set yourself up and limit yourself that I want to achieve this goal and that's it and I'm done. No, what you can achieve and what you can do might be more than you can even dream of or think of today. So don't limit yourself, reach for the stars and land on the moon, but that's all right. Maybe you'll land even further than that. Be honest. Rely on your people, network, lean on your people, but trust in yourself. That would be my biggest message. Trust in you.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys. I had a great time.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much, Mia, for joining us. I thought we had a excellent conversation, and it went by really, really quick. We're an hour and 4 minutes in there, and it felt like, it was like 5-10 minutes. But it was really great. I'd love to have you back on, because I think that we touched on many things, but we haven't got to the tip of the iceberg. And we definitely want to follow you and see how you're moving forward and the new things that you're bringing into the industry and the type of problems that you're facing. And maybe we could help you out, or find somebody that could help you out in that specific area that you may need some help in. But that's what we do this show for. We're here to help other people, and hopefully, what we discussed today will, help other people who are having the same type of problems that they never thought of. So thanks again for joining us.
Thank you. That was so sweet.
Absolutely.
So thank you, everyone, for watching this episode of the Storytelling Chronicles, Empowering Women into Logistics. I am the Bodacious Cowboy. Hope everybody has a great week, and we'll see you next time.